The first sound was a pop, then a spark, then Karen screaming over the fence like somebody had set fire to her designer soul, and I'm not going to lie, I stood there in my kitchen holding a coffee mug and thought, well, Karma finally found an extension cord. It wasn't her house and nobody got hurt. Let me say that. Up front, it was her son's ATV charger coughing out smoke after yet another midnight plug-in to power that did not belong to them. And if you're wondering whether I felt bad, let me save you some time. Not even a little. See, people always think these neighborhood stories start with shouting cops, HOA letters, all that dramatic stuff, but this one started with a tiny blip on a screen, the kind of thing almost nobody would notice. I noticed because electricity is literally what I do for a living. I'm a systems engineer. I design power infrastructure for data centers, backup systems, load balancing, redundancy, the whole glamorous nerd package. So when my home monitor started showing phantom draw between 1 and 3 in the morning, I knew something was off. Not maybe the AC cycled weird off. No, this was repeatable, consistent, external, a pattern. And patterns are where liars get caught. I live in one of those quiet neighborhoods where people obsess over lawn edges and seasonal wreaths and pretend everyone gets along because they wave twice a week. I mostly keep to myself, work my job, tinker with my home solar setup, drink my tea, enjoy peace. Then there was Karen next door, the kind of woman who says community when she means whatever I want. Big sunglasses, loud voice, always acting like the HOA handbook was carved into stone tablets. She moved in after a messy divorce and spent the next 2 years behaving like she was appointed sheriff of the cul-de-sac. She'd complain about kids riding too close to her flowers, act offended by leaf blowers, invent rules that didn't exist, and somehow the HOA always seemed to treat her like she was their favorite donor. Lately, her pride and joy was her teenage son's electric ATV, loud in spirit, if not in engine, and parked out back like a little battery-powered monument to entitlement. Then one afternoon, I am trimming hedges and I see an orange extension cord draped low near the fence line, snaking toward the back corner of my yard near the shed. It disappears before I can fully trace it, and I stand there thinking, no way she's that bold. She was that bold. That night I started testing. The next morning my log showed the same exact draw right on cue. I checked again a different night, same thing. I grabbed photos when I could, documented the timestamps, and because I'm still a civilized adult, I went over there to handle it like a normal neighbor. She answered the door wearing sunglasses and holding a mimosa like it was noon at a resort. I asked calmly if someone in her house had used one of my outdoor outlets while their panel was being repaired. She smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Oh, that. Yeah, just a little charge here and there. You've got solar, you barely notice it." Now listen, I can explain transformers to a room full of stubborn contractors, but I was not prepared for the phrase "you barely notice it" coming from a woman stealing electricity off my property. I told her it wasn't about the amount, it was about permission. I told her it was still theft. She patted my arm and said, "Relax, you're such a tech guy. It's just a little juice." That right there was the moment she stopped having a neighbor problem and started having an engineering problem. I reported it to the HOA, thinking maybe for once they'd do their job. 3 days later, I got a warning letter accusing me of creating hostile neighbor dynamics and unsafe modifications near a shared boundary. Karen had apparently told them I was setting dangerous traps and threatening her family. I just sat there reading that letter and laughing, because when somebody lies that boldly, they're basically daring you to document them. So I stopped playing defense. I tightened up my property setup, put monitoring where it needed to be added, cameras where it was legal, logged every overnight event, and made sure anything on my side of the fence was clearly code compliant and safely protected. I'm not going to walk anybody through the hardware, but let's just say I built a system that did 2 things very well. It notified me the second something got plugged in, and it protected my equipment from unauthorized use in a way that made borrowing my power a very expensive habit. 3 nights later, my phone buzzed a little after 2 in the morning. Power draw detected. I pulled up the feed, and there he was. Karen's son, half asleep, sneaking around in boxers, plugging in that charger like he was clocking into a crime shift. A second later, there was a bright flash at the charger end, a loud pop, and then smoke. No fire spreading, no one injured, just a dead charger and one panicked teenager hopping backward like the grass bit him. Then came the sound I mentioned at the start, Karen shrieking from the patio doors like the universe had personally insulted her. I'd love to tell you that was the end, and she learned a lesson. You already know it wasn't. By morning, she was stomping around in slippers on the phone, retelling the story like I'd built a death ray. The cord vanished, the ATV got covered with a tarp, and by noon, I had an HOA guy in khakis and a golf shirt standing in my driveway with a clipboard and a lecture. He didn't introduce himself, just launched into bylaws and community safety concerns. I let him talk. Then I explained politely that everything on my property was lawful inspected and there to protect my system from unauthorized access. He made notes. He looked confused. I offered him a cookie. He declined, which honestly told me everything I needed to know about his character. So I upgraded my documentation game. I added better motion alerts, more camera coverage, cloud backups, and a cleaner reporting dashboard. Because if Karen wanted to keep lying and the HOA wanted to keep nodding along, I was going to hand them a case file so thorough they'd need tabs and a highlighter. And sure enough, fourth night, 1:42 a.m. alert. Same kid, same stunt, same outcome. Pop, smoke, panic. This time I had crystal clear footage, timestamps, energy logs, and repeated incidents after prior damage, which matters when someone tries to claim ignorance. I printed stills, organized the data, and walked it into the HOA office myself. The woman at the desk. Janice looked at the photos, then at me, then back at the photos like she'd just realized this wasn't a personality dispute, this was theft with receipts. She told me they'd review. I told her that was cute, but if they didn't enforce their own rules, I'd file with the city utility board and let actual adults handle it. That evening, Karen came to my porch furious. No mimosa this time, just raw outrage. She demanded to know what I did to her son's ATV. I told her I had no idea what she meant, but if she was asking why stolen power sometimes has consequences, that sounded like a parenting conversation, not a neighbor conversation. She threatened to sue. I told her I had footage. Then I handed her a USB drive with clips, logs, and screenshots and said, "This is what accountability looks like." She stared at it like it was cursed and stormed off. Now here's where the story turns, because the real twist wasn't Karen doubling down entitled people always do that. The twist was the neighborhood waking up. 3 days later, she sent a police cruiser to my house with a complaint that I'd endangered her family. The officer was decent, professional, clearly bracing for nonsense. I invited him in, showed him the footage, the logs, the property boundaries, the repeated unauthorized plugins, the HOA letters, the whole timeline. He leaned back, scratched his head, and said, "So she left out basically everything." Pretty much. He told me what I already suspected from what he saw. Her complaint wasn't going anywhere, and she was the one flirting with utility theft. He filed his report and left. Karen stood across the street in sunglasses, watching the cruiser pull away like she could intimidate me with posture alone. Then the next domino fell. I started getting approached by neighbors, Tom, Nancy, the Patels folks, who normally just waved and kept moving. They had weird little stories. Fridge blinking overnight, motion lights resetting, outdoor breakers tripping, a strange cord near the fence, Karen's son just grabbing a ball in backyards at odd hours. I invited them over, showed them my logs and footage, and the room changed. You could feel it. What had been private irritation turned into shared recognition. Tom laughed so hard he nearly spit coffee when he saw the video. Nancy got quiet in that dangerous way nice people get when they realize someone's been taking advantage of them for months. We made a group chat that afternoon, shocked by Karen, because once a joke lands, you don't waste it, and by nightfall, half the block was in it. People started checking outlets, comparing bills, pulling smart home logs, swapping camera clips. With consent, I helped a few neighbors set up monitoring and tamper-proof covers. Nothing dramatic, just evident structure and boundaries. And then came the HOA meeting. Usually those things are about mulch color and mailbox paint. This one felt like a courtroom in a rec center. We showed up with folders, screenshots, timestamp statements. Karen sat in front with her arms crossed, jaw tight, still convinced this was some petty campaign against her. She tried calling it hearsay. Then one neighbor handed over a year of power bills showing a spike that lined up exactly with when that ATV showed up. Another had breaker logs. I handed over the police report summary and incident documentation. You could actually watch the board members start doing math in their heads, not moral math, liability math. Then Karen made the mistake that ended her. She stood up and shouted that she had every right to use community power because her HOA dues were high. Community power, meaning our private outlets, our homes, our bills. The room exploded. Even the board president, Greg, one of her longtime shields, couldn't save her after that. They suspended her HOA privileges, pending investigation, started discussing fines, and for the first time since she moved in, Karen looked less like a queen bee and more like somebody who'd just realized the hive was done with her. But the final blow didn't come from the HOA, it came from data. Once multiple neighbors compared usage patterns and submitted statements, the city utility side took interest. My documentation plus the neighborhood logs helped establish a pattern that went way beyond one stolen charge. Late-night draws, repeated unauthorized connections, recurring losses across several homes, it all lined up. She'd apparently been powering more than the ATV, too. Backyard parties, lighting speakers, mini fridges, a whole off-the-books social life running on other people's meters. A parasite-powered little nightclub. When the utility findings came back, the numbers were enough to make it real restitution fees, HOA penalties, legal headaches, official notices. Suddenly her favorite phrase, "it's just a little juice," got real expensive. And the funny thing is, once she lost the power game, she lost the social game too. The neighborhood changed. People started talking, actually talking. The group chat became garden tips, lost packages, dad jokes, storm warnings. We'd all been living beside each other for years, and it took one entitled thief to accidentally turn us into a community. Karen's yard went quiet. The ATV disappeared. The party lights vanished. Her son, who used to rip around like he owned the block, started mowing lawns and avoiding eye contact. Maybe punishment, maybe penance, maybe both. The HOA got cleaned out in the next election too. Folks who never cared before suddenly cared a lot when favoritism hit their electric bill. A few months later, on a calm afternoon, I was out checking my solar setup when I heard a voice behind me. "Hey!" I turned around and there was Karen. No sunglasses, no performance, just tired. She stood right at the edge of my property line and said, "Awkward as hell, I guess I owe you an apology." I looked at her and said, "For which part, the theft, the lies, the police report, or the HOA circus?" She flinched, then muttered, "All of it." And you know what? I didn't forgive her right there. I didn't deliver some speech either. I just told her the truth. It's never harmless when you keep taking what isn't yours, especially after someone asks you to stop. She nodded, said she understood, and walked away slower than I'd ever seen her move. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she just ran out of angles. Either way, the damage had already taught the lesson. That's the part that stuck with me. Not the pop, not the screaming, not even the HOA meltdown. It was how fast entitlement turns into delusion when nobody checks it. Karen could have avoided every bit of this with one sentence. "Hey, can we use your outlet for a few days?" I might have even helped her figure out a safe setup. But some people don't want help. They want access, and they mistake kindness for weakness until they run into someone who documents everything. These days, the logs are clean, the nights are quiet, and the only thing crossing my fence line is wind. I still keep the monitoring system up, not because I'm waiting for war, but because peace is easier to keep when you respect boundaries. That's the real moral. I guess peace isn't passive. Sometimes you have to build it, protect it, and refuse to let somebody smiling in yoga pants drain it from you, one little theft at a time. And yeah, every now and then when the sun drops and the neighborhood goes still, I think about that first pop and Karen's scream, and I smile into my tea like a man who has seen justice arrive on schedule. So tell me this, when someone keeps crossing the line and every polite path fails, where do you think justice ends and payback begins? I'm curious where you land on that. And if you've ever had a neighbor, HOA, or family member try to take advantage of your kindness, drop your story and your take on who was right, who was wrong, and what you would have done.